Hello, I'm Bob Bradley. This is THE 101, Introduction to Theater and Drama Arts. Today, the subject is the producer. It is at this point that we really begin to cross a line from art to commerce. Theater can be, and usually is presented as, a business proposition. The talents and services of the artist are sold through the purchase of tickets to see their product. The producer is the business manager, the person who makes all of this happen from a commerce standpoint. This is going to be true whether it be commercial theater, Broadway, New York, whether it be regional resident theater, professional theater, on down to community theater, university theater, high school theater. And while there may not be an individual who is actually called the producer in some of those organizations, it is still the intent in most cases of all those organizations somehow to sell tickets to their production. And in so doing, then, they are certainly serving the function of the producer in this particular case. The producer, in the sense of that he or she is the individual who is producing this particular event, is the one who seeks funds, who makes up the budget, who stays on top of the expenses, who markets the show, who keeps the production afloat during the performance, who makes decisions if this is what is called an open run, who makes the decision when the production will conclude, when it will be over, when it will close. When artistic decisions and cost come into conflict, the producer makes the decision as to what way to go. He controls the purse strings. In the commercial theater, in the Broadway theater, the producer is the visionary, in fact. He or she is the original catalyst. It is he or she who imagines the production, chooses the way to bring it about, uniting script, artist, and audience. He and she has a property that they wish to produce, that they wish to see a production made for, and wish then to have this production to sell tickets. So the producer secures the property, starts to raise the funds for it, assembles the artistic team, secures the theater, sets the time schedule, makes sure all the funding is available, and then at that point he or she turns it over to the artistic team to create the work within the parameters, the budget, and other monetary matters that he or she has established. Now, once the production opens, the artistic team is finished. They leave. They have, in most cases, nothing else to do with it. The running of that production, if it is what is called an open-ended run, in this particular case applies mainly to commercial theater and especially to Broadway theaters, and that is that a production opens under the hope that so long that it will garner good notices and then in turn will sell at the box office. And so long as the box office meets a certain minimum per week, a sum established by the producer, then that production just keeps on running and running and running. As in the case of the production Cats, the musical, which was a phenomenon unto itself in that it ran something more than 20 years. And yes, it went through many casts and through many changes, but it was still the same product that was being sold on the last day that it was given as on the first night that it was given. But is the producer then, or the executive producer, because producers can frequently be a team, but there's usually going to be one person who is the executive producer for the whole group. It is the executive producer then who is in charge of seeing that that production keeps up its artistic merits, keeps up its artistic level, and that performance after performance, then that which the public is paying to come see, that public is more or less guaranteed that they are going to be seeing the same production on this night 2 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, that the audience saw on opening night. Yes, different casts. Yes, sometimes different kinds of chemistry. But so far as the overall artistic product is concerned, it is the one which was seen at the beginning. The stage manager is the individual who is responsible for seeing that what happens on stage continues the same. The stage manager answers to the producer, and the producer is the overall executive who is going to see that this product remains something which can be sold to the public. Each production has what is called a weekly nut being the amount of money that must be made in order to keep this particular show open. So the producer must see to it that each week the box office meets the nut. And this is going to include, of course, the salaries of all the people that it takes to present the production, and that is going to include not only the cast, whom you will see on stage, but also the crew, whom you probably will not see, but who are extremely important, who are running that production backstage, the box office people from whom you bought your tickets, the ushers who showed you your seats, and all the other people who operate in the theater. This weekly box office must also include the money to pay the rent for the theater. In New York, all theaters are real estate owned by companies who then rent them to the producers for a particular production. And there is a point at which if a production dips below its weekly amount, then at that point the production must close. In order to keep it running, the producer must decide how and what kind of advertising it is going to take to keep this particular show open, so that again there can be enough money made at the box office to make the weekly nut and also to begin to repay the investors for their original backing. That is the reason those people in most cases put their money into that production, because they were hoping that they would make their money back, and not only make it back, but that in turn this particular investment would then pay off and give them income beyond the amount they had originally invested. If a personnel problem arises during either the rehearsals or during the performances during its entire run, then in one way or the other, the producer becomes involved, and he or she is the individual who in some way or the other is to solve those particular personnel problems. Artists can sometimes be temperamental. Actors can certainly sometimes be temperamental, and the producer is the one who must deal with those problems and who must solve them in some way or the other. Elizabeth McCann, who is one of the leading producers for Broadway productions, phrases it rather succinctly when she says, the producer's major task is to worry about everything. Rocco Landman, another leading Broadway producer, has two passions: horse racing and producing Broadway theater. And he sees them as entirely compatible passions. Each one is a major gamble, and each one has about the same results, and that is winning is achieved about 15% of the time. So just as in 15% of the time, Landsman is going to get paid off for horse racing, gambling in horse racing, then the same thing is also true for Broadway productions. But sometime, when one wins, the win can be big. Sometimes the wins in the theater are artistic ones. They are not necessarily always financial ones, although the hope always is that they will be financial. But there are some times in which producers go into a production knowing that the gamble is probably not going to pay off. They are not going to recoup the cost. Landsman was this way in his association with Tony Kushner's Angels in America. This was a play which he felt was so important and needed so much to be done that he was willing to take the gamble, in this case even to gamble with the fact that he almost was sure he could not win. But he wanted to do it so badly because he felt this particular production was needed. In the first place, once the full production was up and running, it was going to take 2 full evenings to see the whole work. It was going to take, therefore, more rehearsal time than one can usually give to a play, and so therefore is going to be more costly in rehearsal than it usually is. And in the end, it did indeed pay off artistically. The play won all kinds of prizes, both Part 1 and Part 2, won all kinds of prizes and awards, almost universal praise, and while it did indeed recoup a good amount of money at the box office, it never completely paid off its investment, and it certainly never paid off anything beyond the original amount here. But the fact that his name and his organization was associated with the production of this particular play, this he felt was enough to make him glad that he had produced it, that he was a part of making it possible for this major epic about America in the 1980s. This had its own reward in being a part of this association and being a producer for this particular production. He and his organization, the Niederlander organization, were indeed, in this particular case, a patron of the arts. It is exactly this philanthropic idea or ideal that allows regional and resident theaters to exist across the country. Yes, regional and resident theaters must make money. Yes, they must sell tickets. They must have their box office. But most of them, the standard figure pretty much is that for most of the somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 300 or so major resident regional theaters that are across the country, about 60% of the total operating expenses of the theater for the year are going to be met through the box office. The rest of it must come through that organization seeking donations, donations from foundations, from corporations, and from individuals. So this then is, in this particular case, the producer here is also very much in charge of fundraising as well as the artistic director. These two work hand in hand in seeking donations, in seeking the philanthropic donation in order to make their organization possible. The producer then in the regional and resident theater is much more of a business manager and a marketing individual and doesn't have quite the same kind of problems as the commercial producer has, especially in the New York theater. Because many of the overall artistic decisions for which the producer is responsible in the other theater, many of these artistic decisions are now made within the overall institution. And almost no regional resident theater in the country has what is called an open-ended run. Instead, they all present seasons of a certain number of productions, and those productions are scheduled for a certain number of weeks, and in most cases, that is it. In a few cases, if they have a production which seems to be enormously successful at the box office, they may be able to retain it for maybe one more week, but frequently not even that, because they also have all of their artists who have signed their contracts, and in most cases their contracts have specified the amount of time for rehearsals followed by the amount of time for the production. So therefore, the producer in this case, in the regional resident theater, has different kinds of considerations that he or she must bring to bear. However, the producer, or the business manager as the person is sometimes called, or sometimes the executive, sometimes called the executive production director, number of different titles here, but they all are still the same function, and that is this person controls the purse strings. This person is the individual who is to see to it that the product, the performance, the production is marketed, that it is sold, that somehow the other than that they take in as high an income as possible at the box office to help defray the expenses of the total organization. The producer is one that does little that is an actual part of the production. The producer doesn't act, the producer doesn't direct, the producer doesn't design, but the producer is the individual who makes it all possible. It is the person who brings all of these things together, who finds or who seeks the funds to make it possible. This then is the reward that the producer gets. What follows now will be a series of interviews with individuals who produce and market theater events. It is their business to get the product up and to get you to the show, to get you to the box office, to get you to buy tickets so that you then have a part in the production which they have produced. The producer is the business person of the production. And this is something that should not be forgotten, and that is that this is a business. And I think that is something we don't frequently think of, but that it is a business, that we are indeed selling something. Now, while in 98% of the cases, the production is achieved through the artistic ideals of the creative team, it is that result that they get from their work then that is to be sold. And who's to be sold needs to be underscored, and that is there needs to be an audience found who will buy the tickets, who will come to the box office, whether it be theater or whether it be the movie house, that this audience will come and will pay down, lay down money and say, I want to pay to go to see this. So therefore, there needs to be a person who is in charge of helping find that particular audience. Or in the case of it may be finding an audience who will look at commercial television and following that, watching television, will want to go out and buy the products that have been advertised in some way or the other. Or finding an audience who may be willing to pay a premium price in order to get certain cables, certain channels on cable television that they may not have otherwise secured. But what they are buying then, in every case, or indicating that they are accepting by the products they buy, that they are buying then the artistic product. But somewhere in there, the producer is going to always be involved in being the person who first has been the business person. And by the way, in many cases, this producer may take multiple individuals, but the function of the producer is going to be the person who has been responsible for the business end of seeing that the budget is maintained, that the money is judiciously spent in some way or the other. And then in turn, the producer is going to turn over to the marketing people who are going to work under him or her for them to sell the product. Now, the thing I think that we frequently don't realize is this product is expensive. That is, expensive to create or to make. One of the things that maybe you should have begun to realize, or certainly we hope by the end of the semester you will realize, is that it takes a team of many people. I was reading not too long ago about a recent a touring production of a rather favorite musical which is going around the country. There were a total of 84 people making up the complete company bound. Of that 84, only 32 of them were on stage. So therefore, the other 50 plus that we are talking about in the company itself are the people you never see, but the people who are absolutely essential to the production, and that is all of the backstage people, or in the case of a touring production, the people who drive the truck, the loaders who are going to load the show out of the trucks onto the stage, who help put it up. But all of these people are going to be involved, and of course, all of them expect to be paid for what it is that they are doing. Now, in addition to this, before this production ever went out on the road, the production had to go through the whole rehearsal building process. And by that being that there had to be, of course, director and the visual designers, and since it was a musical, a choreographer, a musical director of some kind. Then there are still going to be people who are going to have to build the scenery, people who are going to have to construct the costumes. Then there are going to have to be the marketing people who are going to build the marketing campaign that it takes in order as that production moves from town to town. Therefore, to help whoever the presenters are in that individual town or city, they're going to give them the marketing tools, give them marketing materials that they need in order to help them sell that product in some way or the other. Now, the producer is the person who must oversee the budget, must in fact first construct a budget, who must then oversee the budget and be sure that there is the money to pay the people who have been involved, to pay them for their talents, to pay them for their skills. This is what then the producer is doing, and he is the business person here. It is nothing unusual for a Broadway production to open having spent $2 million, $5 million, 12, and especially if it's a musical, 12 or 15 million before it even opens. That is, before the first audience ever arrives in the theater to see this particular product. There is already going to have been 12 million, 15 million, whatever it is that we're talking about here. For a film to open, and before you ever see it, it is nothing unusual for 10, 20, 50, or 100 million, and in some cases more than 100 million, to have been spent before it ever gets to the screen in your hometown and before you ever see it. And now the question, where did this money come from to cover this particular budget? Theater and films don't get made on skating speculation. The money must be there up front. Investors must be brought in. Investors must be convinced. You give us your money, and we are going to make something which is going to be successful. The investors, in turn, then hope and believe that they are going to get their investment back, plus some kind of profit that they are going to make on the money that they have invested here. Next time you go to watch a movie or you watch television, watch those television credits as they roll. Sometimes in television, some of them appear at the beginning of the program, and then there's another long list at the end. But read through those credits. Look at that long list of names and titles. In television and movies also, you will see there are assistant producers, associate producers, producers, and executive producers. All of these individuals are there to see that the money somehow or the other is spent judiciously, and to see to it that a quality product will in some way result from what is coming there. It is a quality which in some way or the other, a product which will in some way or the other sell tickets. Now, how a work of art ever results from this is a mystery. If there were a formula and somebody could sit down and figure it out, that person would become immensely rich. Because unfortunately, when you arrive at the end, it just doesn't happen sometime. It just doesn't come out the way it was intended. It does not turn out to be an artistic product. And sometimes, unfortunately, it doesn't even turn out to be a product that you can sell very well. And this is the reason then something opens at the box office, something opens, and the box office does not click. People do not buy tickets, and the next thing you know, if it's a live theater, that production closes and it's gone forever. If it's a movie, at that point it usually goes then first to cable, and then to the rental market, and then finally just to the DVDs, and they hope that at least somehow or the other some people will buy and take it from that way. The commercial television people are very much aware that the product that they are trying to put together, while it's free to you, the viewer, the television people are aware that what they are trying to do then is to entertain you in such a fashion that you will watch the commercials that are shown while the product is being viewed, and that in some way or the other you will go out and buy that particular whatever it is that was being advertised there. As one television executive remarked, we program for advertisers and viewers. Notice what came first. We program for advertisers. Stephen Bochco, who has been one of the most successful of television producers to create quality television, has once said, I've always said television, and by this he usually means commercial television, I've always said television ain't medicine. You're not going to get people to watch it because it's good for them. And it's exactly that particular attitude which commercial television has to take, because they have to have people to watch it. In fact, it is in television that we have begun to find some of the most interesting positions and interesting kinds of things to happen in terms and developments of what the producer does. Stephen Bochco is a good example of a particular kind of development that has happened in especially commercial television in, well, basically the last 20 years or so. It is Bochco who produced, who created, and produced such acclaimed and highly viewed series as Hill Street Blues, L.A. Law, and NYPD Blue. Of course, he has also been responsible for several other series that failed and pilots of one kind or another that were never picked up. One of his most interesting failures was a very short-term series, maybe no more than 8 episodes total, but a very interesting failure called Cop Rock. It was a police series, all right, but at various times during the episodes, the cops burst into song. Now that just got to be a little too artsy for vast audiences, and very quickly, as I said, I think maybe in a total of 8 episodes, the series went into oblivion, only to be seen maybe every once in a while on some cable channel that picks up shows that might not otherwise be interesting and will view them. Bochco's career is very interesting because he started as a writer on several different television series that were already being made, and he was brought in and wrote episodes for that particular series. He very early on, however, realized that certainly his power as a writer was nil. And so he began realizing that the power lay in, first, the ability to create a series, that is, to have an idea, which could then be sold, and that once that idea was in the works, he would write particular episodes, and usually the first several he would write, and then that it was necessary for him to become not only the writer, but to move into the position of executive producer. It was by being then the executive producer of a series that he knew that he could protect and try to produce the quality of a series that he had not done before. To allow him to protect his writing. As a writer, no power. As the creator, a little more power, but still the protection that he wanted. What he needed then as what he could do as a executive producer was be the chief writer for the series, the creator for the series, the chief writer for the series, write those early episodes, get them to the level of the quality that he wanted them to get, and most of all, protect this material from television executives who might feel that, no, this is not something we can sell. He could fend off the executives, lead the fight, and in fact, frequently necessary, lead the fight to keep the integrity of the artistic vision. So Bochco very early learned that he had to become not only his various artistic positions or creative positions, but also to be then an executive producer. And what is even more interesting these days is that we have now begun to arrive at 2 tiered levels of television, and that is the commercial television and then the television which is a part of cable, the channels, and most of all, the premium cable series of one kind or the other. That is, those premiums of HBO and Showtime. And they have become and begun to be the producers of their own television series, and thus, by being able to do daring material and to do material of such a nature that commercial television can't accept it, that they are now attracting a whole series of creators, writers, directors, and producers who want to do material which are of a specific high quality. Such series as Sex and the City, Queer Folk, Oz, The Sopranos, those are something that the commercial television could never do, and now are attracting producers who want to work with high-quality artistic people and produce a quality television that would not otherwise be possible. The producer here then is the artist and the catalyst who is producing a product that will sell then to the viewer wanting to see a particular level or quality of television. The producer does little that the audience ever sees. The producer doesn't act, doesn't direct, doesn't design, but the producer is the individual who makes it all possible and who works to get us, the audience, to get us to show up at the box office or to turn on the television to that particular channel and watch that particular show. The producer is not one you can ever label. That's what the producer did. But the quality of the show that you have just viewed, whatever the means may be that you have seen it, the producer is the one who has been responsible for in a large part for seeing to it that it was affordable for the artistic people to do the vision that they had created.